Folks, all right, it's V the Guerrilla Economist coming to you live with my main man, CJ, who's working the airwaves, making sure the broadcast coming out crispy and clean. And you can check us out, roguenews.com. Follow us on Twitter at Real Rogue News and Rogue News on every single podcasting app known to humanity. Also, check out our paid sponsors, mycbdedibles.com, mycbdedibles.com, where you get your CBD deliciousness anywhere you want. From coffee to delicious truffles, you go there, and even you get some for your pooch. Go check it out, mycbdedibles.com. And without further ado, I have one of my favorite minds. Okay, and I don't say that lightly. I'm a pretty smart guy, but Matt has me floored with his level of knowledge, his understanding of so many systems and how it all works together. Matt is one of my favorite brains out there. I love listening to him. And folks, if you have a notebook, get it out. Start taking notes. Start getting the level geostrategic play-by-play. So it's a beautiful thing. I mean, between Mathew Ehret, Harley Schlanger, London Paul, what else do you need? And you got the Gorilla and CJ. I mean, you don't need anything else. And CJ, with all this recent YouTube purge, we're the last man standing, it seems.
We are.
With that being said, Matt, welcome back, buddy. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me back on. Always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure. Matt, where do you want to begin, man? So many crazy things are happening. We have Hunter Crackhead Biden. He's been exposed. Mm-hmm. We have evidence upon evidence upon evidence upon evidence. And, of course, nothing is really being done. How does this fit? I mean, when we get out of the conspiracy world and get into the world of the geostrategic, geoeconomic, how does this play in the world right now? And I know you have a lot of smart sources and contacts that are global. How do you see this playing out? How does this fit with the narratives that are being formed right now in Russia, in China, in the Middle East? What's your take on all?
Well, yeah, I think that indeed it is a very insane period in human history to be alive. 1 second. Here we go. Grab. Sorry. And I think the best place to start, as always, is the world, is to start maybe on the international scene to get a little bit of context, as you pointed out, in terms of how is Russia, how is China thinking right now, what are some of the hot spots before maybe zeroing back into the insanity within the United States and some of the battles playing out there. Right. I think that as far as hotspots, because that is really peppering the world right now. You have a clash, as you and I always talk about. They're shaping everything as a clash between two systems, two paradigms. You have the multipolar system led by Russia, China, and other countries, which has really took a stand in defense of sovereign nation states and the right of every nation to mutually develop and have control over their economic and political destiny. And then you have this opposing ideology of a unipolar system of a one world government, the idea of transcending nation states to a new order where technocrats and unelected elite are managing the levers of production consumption under a new system. Obviously, I think your audience, if they are regular viewers of your show, are probably in favor of the former system, which is much more in harmony with our actual long-term interests as a species. Now, there are a lot of flashpoints being set up.
Right.
In the last months, especially, and the last weeks, Pompeo has been running amok in China's backyard, trying to consolidate. Pompous Pompeo, yes. I mean, this guy has really got to get the Bolton treatment, but so far he's hanging in there. He's got a lot of protectors, and he's representing a branch of the Pentagon which has a view of only confrontation with Russia and China. There is no hope for dialogue or mutual trust or development with our Eurasian partners. Putin always goes out of his way to call the United States, in spite of everything, his potential partner, and so does China for the most part. Pompeo doesn't think that way, and he recently, in a speech in Japan, I don't know if you saw this, but he actually said, this is not really about a dispute between the United States and China. It is a fight over the soul of humanity.
He's freaking crazy. Dude, Pompeo is a leftover of Team B. He's been groomed by Team B. And for those that don't know, that's the Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, Cheney, that ilk that was in government in the 80s and 90s. They were known as the crazies. They were literally known as the crazies. And that is who has completely fashioned Pompeo's worldview, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the fact that he's right now trying to consolidate this quad partnership of an Asian Pacific NATO, it's just absurd. Which involves both basically the United States, Australia, Japan, and India. Um, I think it's a complete disaster, and he's also extended the invitation for other countries who have any point of hostility or tension with China, who are China's neighbors, including Taiwan, who's part of China, but people forget that. Cambodia, Malaysia, Laos, Thailand. He's trying to get everybody to Vietnam to jump on board. If they have a little bit of a territorial dispute and the U.S. has some leverage economically and politically inside their countries, he's trying really hard to bring them on board to this anti-China NATO of the Pacific, which Wang Yi, the foreign minister of China, just called out quite brilliantly on October 12th, where he said, I pulled out a little quote even, because I think he was just, he pointed it out very nicely, where he said, what the United States currently pursues is to trumpet the Cold War mentality and to stir up confrontation among different groups and blocs and to stoke geopolitical competition. What it maintains is the dominance and hegemonic system of the United States. And then he says, in this sense, this strategy is itself an underlying security risk. If it is forced forward, it will wind back the clock of history.
Yep.
And so does China respond with force in turn, which is what a lot of these Western geopoliticians are expecting, because they project a lot of their own limitations onto their supposed enemies. So the U.S., if you read their defense doctrines and a lot of their official analysts who are talking about what is China's motive, what is Russia's motive, they're all acting like the U.S. and China, that Russia and China are the United States currently, and that they will respond with force in turn, with debt traps in turn, the way the U.S. and its allies, since the death of John F. Kennedy especially, have used the World Bank, the IMF, to create debt traps and debt slavery for the world to keep development from actually happening the way it should have unfolded if things had gone differently in the 60s. So they're trying to project that psychologically onto China. Now, the difference is it's not working, because China and Wang Yi, along with Zheng Yi, I forgot his name, Zheng Yishi, who both of them represent the highest echelons of China's economic and foreign policy voice, have gone for a foreign policy tour of several nations. So Yang Jiechi, he's the director of Foreign Affairs Committee of China. He went to Sri Lanka, Algeria, the UAE, and Serbia over the past several days, basically bringing Belt and Road Initiative projects, COVID response assistance, medical assistance, and many other things to all of these countries, basically offering billions of dollars of Chinese investment into desperately needed infrastructure in Serbia. Like I said, the UAE, Algeria has a new economic revival plan, which is a complete rejection of the IMF World Bank system and a return to an idea that they last had in the 60s of industrial sovereignty. China has come out fully supporting that. Sri Lanka as well is a major part of the maritime and land-based Belt and Road Initiative. So Yang Jiechi has gone forth to solidify that. Wang Yi has gone to Cambodia, where there's a free trade agreement with China that's being signed, to Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, where there's the Duterte build infrastructure strategy, which is, again, very synergistic with the Belt and Road. It's all tied to massive infrastructure, very long-term thinking, and China's given its full support to this. Malaysia as well, when you just visited the foreign minister of Malaysia, where they were finalizing also the East Coast Rail Link. It's a 640 kilometer passenger and freight rail, part of the Belt and Road, and Laos as well. There's also high-speed rail between Thailand and southern China that is being finalized. So all of these countries which the United States has tried to put so much effort into pulling out of a pro-China orientation, are increasingly seeing that their future is with the Belt and Road. It is with development. It's not with the getting caught in the middle of a nuclear crossfire between a belligerent USA and China. They're increasingly seeing that that's not going to work. So that's one point of a hot spot. And I think that, again, just comparing the two approaches it's a breath of fresh air to just look at what China is doing by extending just olive branches of goodwill. And I didn't even talk about the U.S. military buildup running military maneuvers on their perimeter. So China is ending points of tension. The current geopolitical system is based on increasing tension to increase divide to conquer conflicts.
British model.
The British model, exactly to the T. Russia as well is very concerned because you have not only what we all know of the vastly expanding NATO buildup, including B-52 flyovers that have been ongoing now over all of the NATO countries recently on Russia's southern perimeter, and a massive expansion of the full spectrum dominance ballistic missile shield, which is an attempt to try to render Russia's response capabilities to a nuclear attack obsolete. Now, this doesn't work. This is absurd because, I mean, Russia has already announced next generation tech on so many levels that allows them to overcome whatever ballistic missile shield that the U.S. and NATO are trying to build.
But Matt, I don't know how their hypersonic missiles are going to compete against a 67-year-old B-52. I mean, I don't know, Matt. I'm not so sure about that.
You know, that's the thing. It's completely trumped the entire U.S. because, like you said, the U.S. is still using Cold War tech in many ways to try to use logic of a game that doesn't exist anymore to try to manage something which is far beyond the limits of the game. The game planners are living in the past.
They are. It's they've. I don't think people understand this. Like what we have in the U.S. And I've taken this apart from some of the work I've done in the past, but really, when you start diving into the military-industrial complex, you realize it's not about winning wars. Mm-hmm. It has nothing to do with that. It's a wealth extraction engine, just like Wall Street is a wealth extraction engine, just like banking is a wealth extraction engine. And you start understanding that their number one thing. People always ask me, "Well, V, do you think Americans build first class military equipment?" And I say, "No, we have first class marketing. We have the best marketing in the world. I mean, no other country touts a failed piece of junk fighter plane like the F-35." And one of my guys, who's a client of mine, was on the development team for the F-35, and he was telling me 4 years ago, "Hey, V, this is a flying piece of crap." I was like, "What happens? What are you talking about? I thought this was the most advanced, most greatest thing since sliced bread." He's like, "No, he was doing the trials. He was involved in doing the trials on the F-35C, which is the carrier-based variant, and I believe it was either on the Reagan or the Roosevelt aircraft carrier. And when they're doing sea trials with the damn thing, every hour it's spent in the air is close to 90 hours in maintenance. It is, I mean." They have their helmet mounted sights, which are it's an amazing camera. The pilot can see 360 degrees, but it's a 480p resolution camera. 480p. You can't see nothing. This ain't 4K. It's 480. It's like the Motorola, the Motorola Razr flip phones from back in the days. You had the 1.3 megapixel.
Yeah.
That's how much. Right. That's how much resolution and clarity it had. You couldn't see nothing. It was so bad, but yet it's marketed to Americans, so they believe we have the best equipment in the world. And if you make the population believe that we have the greatest, best equipment in the world, then the population is willing to get into wars because they think that they will win overwhelmingly, and that's not the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you look at, you just compare some of the tech, the aerospace tech that Russia has already unveiled and is using. I mean, some of their planes allow them to fly kind of like a dragonfly, frontwards, backwards, upward, like a 360 mobility.
Crazy.
And some of these NATO-oriented fighter pilots were complaining after their little flyby with Russia recently that the Russian jets that came out to meet them tapped them.
Oh my God, really?
Message. And they got back and landed and they were like, "Oh, Russia was actually acting belligerent. They tapped us. That's so dangerous." And it's like, no, you have to have so much control and confidence in yourself as a pilot, but also in your machine to do something like that with Absolutely. These types of aircraft. They're so far ahead. And you brought up the F-35s. I mean, this is another point as well. According to the 2019 defense doctrine, the U.S. has also recently, at least under the current Pentagon strategy, and I don't think that Trump is a part of this. So let me just get across that I think that there's the Pentagon, there's this apparatus, and then there is what what Trump and other patriotic officials in the U.S. would rather do that are not the same thing. You can't paint a blanket judgment on the U.S. as a whole right now. I think that's pretty clear, but still I have to say it. But in Alaska, there's a recent announcement of a forward stationing of 150 F-22s and F-35s in the middle of Alaska at the Lauzon Air Force Base, which is pretty much puts them within a 600-mile flight from Russia directly, with 100 mile gap over the Bering Strait. Which is seen as a major threat, obviously, by Russia. This is all part of, again, the massive military buildup that sees Russia and their intention to expand economic activity on the in the Arctic as a complete strategic threat for America. Now, of course, America doesn't have any icebreakers except for 2. Russia has 40. China already has more and better quality icebreakers than the US. And yet these people, again, to go back to this insane Stone Age logic, still think that they can be competitors and block the development that is going to happen in the Arctic if there isn't a war unleashed. So just to say, there are these points of hotspot. And then finally, the last thing I'd like to just point out as an international hotspot is the array of fires being lit under Russia's soft underbelly. This includes, obviously, what's happening in Armenia and Azerbaijan over the Nagorno-Karabakh autonomous region, which has Turkey's hands all over this, and a lot of radical extremists. I think it's been proven fairly well at this point, have been deployed from Syria, from Libya, from Iraq, from even the Kurdish area into Azerbaijan, where they're also being then deployed to carry out atrocities in Artsakh, the Republic of Artsakh, which is, again, it's sort of like an autonomous zone within an internationally recognized area of Azerbaijan, but they've had relative independence now for decades, and they're primarily Christian. They identify mostly with Armenian, and this has just become a zone under attack massively. But you also have, on top of this, which could blow up. I mean, you could have an all-out war that could spread beyond those limits. You also have Belarus, where there's a color revolution that's still not been put down, challenging Lukashenko and his victory. A lot of this is being funded by the National Endowment for Democracy, as are all of these pro-democracy movements that are challenging authoritarian regimes, usually friendly to Russia and China. You have Georgia, where the Saakashvili forces...
the Tie Eater.
Huh?
The Tie Eater.
Tie Eater? Saakashvili? Yeah. What's that?
Yeah, Saakashvili. Remember when he was, I believe this was right after the Ossetia conflict, where Saakashvili was caught on TV eating his own tie.
I missed that. That's funny.
You keep talking. I'll go find the image.
Yeah, please do. But Saakashvili, exactly. He's the guy who in 2008 actually did try to get a fighting war, and did get a fighting war with Russia over the South Ossetia region, another little autonomous zone on Russia's perimeter. He expected to get some U.S. backing at the time that fell through, but there was a 5-day war, and that could have, had Georgia been a NATO member at that time, pulled in the Article 5 that would have pulled all of the NATO alliance into a fighting war with Russia. So, I mean, you could just see how much of a tinderbox that would be if the Saakashvili forces do come out victorious in the oncoming elections in November. That would obviously inflame the South Ossetia connection. That's him. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah,
there he goes.
Not a leader. Yeah, and you hear where this guy went, right? After he got caught for corruption.
Ukraine, where else?
Yeah, exactly. He was made governor of. Yeah, exactly. He was made governor of a region in Ukraine that had the highest density of Azov battalion and neo-Nazi groups committing atrocities. Probably not a coincidence. So yeah, you have Georgia. You have Kyrgyzstan, where the elections again are being disputed because the current government is pro-Russian, and so you have a lot of Open Society Foundation money going into disputing those elections, and that could render that place ungovernable. East Ukraine is still a mess. Moldova has the Transnistria autonomous zone as well, which could easily also be inflamed. So you have these different hotspots, and also now again because of Turkey bringing in these radical Islamic forces into Azerbaijan, The Russian foreign intelligence chief has said that this is recognized by Russia as a whole as being a threat not only to bringing in more terrorism into Russia, but also into all of Europe. Turkey is just playing such a dangerous game. And this is one of those countries which is sort of trying to walk both sides of the paradigm, and
Right.
and they're playing such a danger. It's crazy. Where on the one hand, they recognize there's saner forces in Turkey that recognize that their future should be met well by working with China and with Russia on building S-400 military systems built by Russia. Also on building the Belt and Road Initiative projects that China wants to invest in massively and has to build transport grids in Turkey. That's a stabilizing force and a good one. And then you also have this other thing where you have this Ottoman Empire view where Erdogan does seem to really want to be a massive absolute regional power, where that's induced him to create conflicts in the Eastern Mediterranean with Greece and with and all over. So you have this. So you have all of these things. So how do you put that out? How do you use the China philosophy, the way you have Wang Yi, the foreign minister, who has demonstrated how this works pretty well in the last few days? How do you apply this now to the Caucasus, to the Central and Eastern European zones? Well, I think for this, what Trump has demonstrated to a certain degree is a sense of recognition of how this works, and a lot of people don't know this on foreign policy, especially in America. A lot of my American contacts, they don't pay enough, I think, attention to the international scene and what Trump does there. But in terms of putting out fires, one of the key fires could have been, up until recently, and still could be, but is the Serbia-Kosovo dispute that Trump has gone very far in putting water onto those fires. Serbia and Kosovo obviously had a war that ended in 1999, but it's been a tinderbox for a long time waiting to be sparked, again, in Russia's underbelly. Now, on September 4th, Trump was able to secure an important agreement in Washington between the foreign ministers of both countries, who signed an economic normalization agreement. This is very important to realize what a big deal this is, because rather than trying to get some formal peace agreement without changing the economic conditions of either country, both of whom are extremely impoverished, it's a breeding ground for bigotry and for hostilities. He said, no, let's just focus on economic development, create conditions of mutual trust by working on projects together. The U.S. Development Finance Corporation was deployed with the U.S. Import-Export Bank to provide $1 billion to build rail connecting the capitals of both Serbia and Kosovo, as well as rail links down to the Baltic that are tied to massive industrial and mining sectors to create new markets. And also a lot of money and loans to small and medium enterprises. That's also very, very important. So this has worked to a degree. Also, the diplomatic maneuvers that were accomplished recently with the Abraham Accords that began to actually start getting some traction for the first time in decades between Muslim countries like the UAE and a few other countries with Israel to actually recognize Israel's statehood. There's many. I'm in no way saying that Israel is a wonderful country because of this, but it is a big deal that this was able to occur, because now Israel is brought in to recognize the nationhood of Kosovo, and economic agreements were tied to those as well. So you have an increasing climate, and these countries also recognized Israel's statehood too. And especially the Jerusalem as the capital. Now, the idea of creating a climate of stability is important. If you were to go to Azerbaijan and Armenia and the Nagorno-Karabakh zone, you have a lot of the same opportunities for economic development that could diffuse the situation importantly, since both countries are a part of the international, what's called the North-South Transport Corridor. This is a very. Can I actually do a screen share? Is that possible? Yeah, I can.
Yep. Just there's a link on the bottom that says screen share. Just click that, and CJ will display it.
All right. So here, let's do a screen share. Share. If this works, this works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah, once you hit screen share, you have a thing that says share your screen pop up. Then you could share either your entire screen or the app. If you click on application window, you can share a specific screen.
Okay, we're going to stop the share because we should have practiced this in advance. But anyhow, I'll paint the picture in words. So basically, the international north-south transport corridor passes right through Armenia and Azerbaijan from Russia all the way down to Iran, and it connects ultimately to ports in India. This is a project which is very important right now. It has taken on new life, especially with the Polar Silk Road having developed, where the traditionally east-west rail links and development corridors between China and Europe through the Middle East, which involves 6 overland lines and also a maritime aspect. This is now extended to become increasingly a north-south as well project with the Polar Silk Road that ties to Russia's Far East development strategy. Part of the Russia Far East development strategy, which involves not only increasing maritime shipping across the Arctic shipping lanes by 5-fold within 4 years, will cut down shipping time by 10 to 20 days between China and Europe. But it also involves massive opening up of resources and development sectors in Russia's underdeveloped Arctic zones. Part of that overall project is this, again, north-south transport corridor that goes from Russia's north all the way down through oh geez, there's so many countries involved. There's this involves Belarus, it involves Kyrgyzstan, it involves Kazakhstan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, Oman, Turkey, Syria is involved. They've all signed on to this project in India. It's 7,200 kilometers of rail, new port development, new industrial cities. It's very much like the BRI, and it wasn't moving very fast until recently. It's accelerated, and it's very synergistic. Part of that involves a 316-kilometer rail link in Armenia that would connect ultimately to the Persian Gulf. It would involve something like 80 bridges, 100 tunnels through the mountainous Caucasus. It's a huge project. It would involve an important amount of support from both the USA and China. And as I said, China's Yang Jiechi has just been to Serbia as well, where they're building up the east-west hub of the Belt and Road Initiative. Serbia is working very well with the United States. So there's a lot of synergy is what I'm saying. You know, the multipolar alliance is not just some formal security doctrine. It's really built around a way of thinking about development, a way of thinking about self-interest as being more than a zero-sum game. And by Trump having made, and you judge it by people's behavior, not so much what they're saying, but their behavior. Trump's behavior and his actions policy-wise have demonstrated a coherence with this in a strong way, which counteracts what we're seeing coming out of the regressive neocon faction. Last point that I would just showcase, Trump has gotten a lot of criticism for taking out the funding from the National Endowment Democracy and other democracy groups that are tied to the CIA in both Hong Kong as well as in Belarus, which it's won him a lot of flack from within his own security establishment. This is, again, very important because you have to defuse these regime change operations masquerading as popular movements. The other thing, and the last thing I would say about a positive way of thinking coming out of the U.S. administration is in the Arctic, where on just several weeks ago, you had the announcement of the U.S. support for the Alaska to Canada rail connection, which is something that passed under the radar of a lot of the media, but Trump put out a tweet offering full U.S. federal support for this project going forward. It's a great breath of fresh air and a rejection of the militarization of the Arctic, which basically, okay, so what is this project? It's been on the books for a long time, really for over since the last century. This has been discussed, and occasionally it comes bubbling to the surface, and then either people are assassinated, overthrown, a war occurs like usual, and it's tossed aside and forgotten for a while. But currently there's no rail between Alaska and the lower 48 states or most of Canada. There's a big 1,000+ mile gap of nothing. Lot of potential. I mean, there's so many resources, so much development
Well, that's
potential.
done on purpose, man. I mean, last several decades, this has all been the wet dream of the technocrats. Concentrate us into certain geographic regions of dense population,
Yeah.
set up the control grids, and have us all monitored. Uh, the fact that I mean, if we can get our own Belt and Road Initiative here in the Western Hemisphere, just to link up the massive swaths of land north and south between Canada and the United States. I'm talking about that's an economic explosion, the likes of which we haven't seen in God knows how
Yeah.
long, Matt. It'd be tremendous prosperity.
Oh man, you stated it really dead on. And yeah, the fact that this was coming, this project currently in Canada, where this is where I live. There's something that a lot of Canadians have been induced to make fun of for decades, and it's called the rail to nowhere. So basically, in British Columbia, you have Dease Lake, which is the northernmost point of a rail line. It just sort of ends. It ends, and there's no real sense of what was supposed to happen. So when the government back in the '60s was building rail into the north, the orientation in that system. This is before the Bretton Woods fixed exchange rate was destroyed in 1971, and the world was turned into a consumer society speculative basket case. Before that, we had an industrial economy where the valuation of money, of profits, were all tied to what are you building for the future. It was tied to physical productivity, real standards that people could then judge, okay, is this money inflationary? Is it justified debt? Or is it unjust debt that's going to just become more debt because you're destroying your ability to produce in the future? So people used to have that standard, which they have lost in the last 40 plus years. However, so in that time, the program was to connect Alaska to Canada and open up whole corridors of Arctic development, science cities in the Arctic. You have blueprints with federal backing, both with U.S. support and Canadian support under John Diefenbaker, for example, who had an Arctic vision in the 50s and 60s. His ally in BC who built this rail into the north was W.A.C. Bennett, a premier for 20 years. Diefenbaker was very confused. He was a prime minister for about 6 years, and probably the last actual nation-building, legit prime minister we had who wasn't a complete puppet. He was ultimately confused about what was controlling the very complex Byzantine deep state of Canada's federal structures. So he didn't understand the Privy Council. He didn't understand most of these things. He was just a good guy who liked development. And so he was duped to make a lot of bad decisions. And he ultimately got ousted in a bit of a soft coup in '63, run by Rhodes Scholars who ran the Bank of Canada, which he wanted to then use. In those days, it was a big fight to use the Bank of Canada as an instrument for real national development. That's a whole story unto itself. So he was ousted. Bennett was always at war with these Rhodes Scholars within his own government, within Ottawa, who always, like you said, wanted to keep a technocratic control of no development in the north because it's easier to control something which is not changing. It's not really about protecting nature. That's a cover story. It's really about control. And as soon as you start developing your water systems or your energy systems in a serious way, you create new potentials for creative change, for further development, which is not monopolized. These ideas that will happen because of these projects and these new technologies that will come online because of commitments for projects like that create situations of less control for people who are control freaks. So they've been using, especially in the late 60s and 70s, the idea of conservation lands to block all of the zones that were ripe for real building by people like John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, Diefenbaker, many, there's so many. All that to say, so the rail line is called the Rail Line to Nowhere. They tried selling it for $1, couldn't sell it. And people make fun of it, but they don't realize it's like the reason why they make fun of William Seward, the former Secretary of State under Lincoln, for having purchased Alaska from the Russians in 1867 for $7 million. And they say, oh, it's Seward's folly. And it's like, no, if you actually look at where the trajectory for the world was going back then, there was a plan for extending Lincoln's transcontinental railway all the way up through Canada into Alaska, through the Bering Straits, along with telegraphs into Russia, into China, into Eurasia. That was the plan.
Absolutely. That was the first open system attempt. And people don't realize it was always the natural flow for the U.S. and Russia to become close allies and friends.
Yes.
That is the one thing the globalists hate, and that's why they've kept us separate. They kept us divided. They
Yes.
don't want the U.S. and Russia to be together. It's
No.
always been the trajectory. Like what Matt said last time he was on, 1776 didn't happen in a vacuum. There were some key events that were happening around the world that kept the British Empire on their toes so they could never really respond. And that was helped with the Russians, the French, and the rebellion that happened in southern India with the I forgot the guy's name.
Mysore Rebellion under Hyder
The
Ali.
Mysore Rebellion, correct.
And Tipu Sultan. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's vital.
Yep.
America was never in a vacuum. Yeah, it was never part of a closed system. The world as a whole is one system, and it has different cultures, different nation states, but these are not the sum. The whole is not the sum of parts in some game master's stratagem. It's part of the universe, right? So we're on a planet, right? That's revolving and rotating around the sun, and I think it's important to just bring that context into mind all the time when thinking about economics and geopolitics in our history, because we're a species that's relatively new, and we have, I mean, expanded our population and our life expectancy and our potentials in ways that no other species of the biosphere has ever been able to do, to the point that we've created a situation for the first time with almost 8 billion of our species that has a capacity to both respect our differences, but also focus on the best qualities of each other, of each culture, in order to embark upon projects that allow us to meet common challenges. That's something we talk about later on, because we were currently talking about the Arctic. But so back to the Arctic, this strategy, and I'll link this back to Trump's push to support the Alaska to Canada rail line, I promise. It's been a long time coming. And even though you had people like William Gilpin, Lincoln's former bodyguard and the first governor of Alaska, the first governor of Colorado, not Alaska, who were major advocates of this. Tsar Alexander II was a big supporter, as well as the third, of building the Bering Strait, as well as Nicholas II, the Tsar that was disposed. It was destroyed by a couple of world wars, and in the middle of World War II, it came back for a period under Henry Wallace, the vice president under FDR, who worked with Molotov, the foreign minister of Russia, to bring this back onto one of the key policies that was going to define the post-World War II age, was building the Alaska to Canada rail and then the Bering Strait crossing. This is written down, this is recorded, I've written about it, but obviously Wallace was ousted, FDR died, and the Anglo-American ideology came back in full force, ushering in the Cold War. And things that we now look at as these poxes on human civilization and peace, like the CIA, were put online under the Truman era of mutually assured destruction, where essentially British intelligence infiltrated and completely took over control of much of American foreign policy and increasingly internal policy with the FBI. So this is something which we've not talked much about. It had a period, the Alaska to Canada rail had a moment of resurgence in the late 60s, but by the time that the post-industrial model was imposed on us in 1971 in full force, that really didn't come up. And instead, what we had in Canada as well as in the US was an acceleration of just creating protective, no development zones, which has gotten even worse under Justin Trudeau, who's passed over the last year more laws to prevent development of oil, mineral extraction, offshore drilling, all nominally in the defense of nature, but not really. So Trump has just come forward offering his support for the A2. It's called it's a consortium of private companies. Since the federal governments were not getting any motion, they were just resisting this for a long time. In 2015, a grouping of companies came together who saw this incredible potential with the Asian markets growing. It's all, and their model is all built around the growth of the Asian development models. You can look on their website. And they put in $15 million into engineering feasibility studies that centers on not BC this time, but rather Alberta, which is being destroyed under the COVID, first under the general contraction of our development strategies, But then also COVID has accelerated it. And so there's a lot of despair in Alberta, a lot of unemployment, a lot of suicide, as there is everywhere, but it's really accelerated there, which is Alberta was never really permitted to develop industry and manufacturing, and what little it did have has been shut down in favor of it just being a resource extractor. So this company put forth this design that would build 2,500 kilometers of rail from Alberta, connecting the lower 48 states, and then passing through a couple of territories, just briefly skimming them into Alaska. That would open up a completely new situation of massive job creation. Hundreds of thousands of jobs would be created immediately. It's shovel-ready projects, and the fact that Trump just offered his support, Alberta, a province that has, see, the thing in Canada is that you don't really need to have federal support for a project for resources. Unlike most countries, our constitution was wired in such a way that all of the provinces were designed to be kept divided under a weird philosophy of control, divide to rule. Usually that's kept us backwards. However, in certain cases, that's given us an upper edge against those who would prefer in Ottawa that the parts stay backwards. So in this case, Alberta has given their full backing to it as well as a province. And just to give an illustration of that, the provinces in Canada can even make a foreign treaty with another government. It's that weird. So like BC in 2016 signed a memorandum of understanding with the Belt and Road with Guangdong province of China. That was sabotaged later on, but it just showed that I don't think there's any other country in the world that a province can go and do that. And I don't support things like confederations or hyper states' rights to divide the United States. The U.S. is a republic and should remain integral. But in the case of Canada, which is not a republic, it's a complete Privy Council deep state structure with very minimal democratic controls on the federal level. I think that there's certain usefulness to having these freedoms on the local level. So all that to say, there's a fight to be had over this, and but Trump has demonstrated the correct insight that you need to change the behavior again and introduce new potentials. You can't just get you can't just force any sort of change to just like stop directly the war policy and the warmongers from the neocons against China or Russia. I mean, he should do more, I think, and I don't know what's blocking him, but the economic development has to always come first, whether it's the Middle East or Africa or whether it's the Arctic or Asia.
And I think that's the way forward as we try to build, and I think the patriots in this country, patriots in Canada, patriots in the UK, patriots in the basically the populace, man. It's the populace versus the globalists. And the way that we win this great fight between the multipolar world versus the unipolar world is that we lead with economics and innovation rather than military and conquest.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And that's the way the U.S. That's the best traditions of the United States, is to be like John Quincy Adams made the point when he formulated the Monroe Doctrine, right, in the 1820s, is to not go abroad chasing monsters, but rather be as a city on a hill and be an example for what excellence actually is, and demonstrate to others what they can also do by modeling themselves off of your good behavior and respecting yourself and respecting your people by providing them the means for water, infrastructure, job creation, intelligence, right? Expand the thinking of your citizens. And then when other nations see that you're doing that, you can then offer them the assistance to help them. And again, that has always been the better America that the deep state has been infiltrated going back to the American Revolution to undermine and destroy. And I'm talking here about the days when Aaron Burr was trying to organize secessionist plots early on, way before the secessionist movement of the Civil War era. You already had secessionist movements that were attempted going back to the 1790s under Aaron Burr and his what are called the Essex Junto and the Virginia Junto, the establishment families who were always loyal to the British East India Company and British Empire, and who never left America in 1776 the way some of them did. So some Americans, I think we've talked about this in some of the past shows, did come up and set up English-speaking Canada, in what's today's Toronto and here in Quebec. Some of them left saying that no, the revolution's not for me. I prefer to kiss the ass of monarchy. That's more my way of doing things. These are things that created things like the Canadian Family Compact system that the rebellions of the 1830s here in Canada, in Upper Lower in Canada, fought to try to resist, but didn't work out. Some of the British loyalist families stayed back in America and chose to try to subvert it from within. One of their key champions was Aaron Burr. And Burr, I mean, again, you know me, I like segues, but I hope you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Okay, cool. So this guy set up Wall Street. Like he had a federal water project that he was in charge of under Adams in 1798, and he took that money, embezzled it, and turned it into a giant bank, later called the Bank of Manhattan, that J.P. Morgan and Chase Manhattan today still call on their website the foundation of Wall Street. And it was a speculative bank, which essentially brought in British banking practices from the City of London into America. This also was a part of a program to basically take the upper 6 free states, because not all of the states were free, right? The lower 7 states were still, they permitted slavery. And the logic was, rather than fight to try to extend the principles of the Constitution to all states, the way Lincoln later on did, the logic of the Essex junto under Aaron Burr's lead was to say, let's just break off the upper 6 states and create a new confederacy with Canada. And they were very clear that Canada was going to be on board, and the British intelligence was completely on board. The British ambassador Anthony Merry was in dialogue with these players. Some of these are still on record. Not all of the letters were destroyed. And their logic was, okay, we're going to create one northern free confederacy with a pro-British Union of the Americas, and then we're going to have a dirty slavery confederacy of the South that will have their slaves, and they'll also be pro-British, right? Because the British are buying up all their cotton. So that was something which was only prevented because Alexander Hamilton stepped in and sabotaged it vigorously. First, by getting Jefferson elected as president, who was, even though he was his enemy, Hamilton made the point that Jefferson is at least a patriot who wouldn't allow for complete dismemberment of the Union, whereas Burr has no principles, no scruples, and he'll do it. So he fought to get his enemy, Jefferson, elected president. And then when the plan changed a bit, and Aaron Burr by 1804 had a new plan to use his control of New York to make the plan happen again. If he couldn't get federal controls, at least he could get the strongest state of the Union. Again, his plan to become governor was thwarted by Alexander Hamilton, which just he was like, I can't handle it anymore, and he ended up organizing the duel that got Hamilton killed. Aaron Burr was part of that. So why am I saying this? Basically, there has been this deep state structure infiltrating its tentacles into the heart of America for a long time. And the better American patriots who saw that America's foreign policy interests, like John Quincy Adams, like Hamilton, later on like Lincoln and his allies, like Gilpin, or like McKinley or Garfield, or you could look at any of these great leaders of America who die in office, Harding or FDR or JFK. They are all tapping into the same view, as you said, that America should be an example and should help other nations develop by providing the means to develop full spectrum economies, industrial sovereignty, and not simply just have debt servicing for usurious loans, the way the British system always used itself, or just simply wealth extraction with no development of the minds of the people or the well-being of the people. And that really shows you the difference between the Russia-China program of the Polar Silk Road, the Belt and Road Initiative, which is very much in that tradition, versus what Trump is fighting in the US. And I think based on his actions, what Trump has demonstrated he wants to revive once more, which brings us back to the US situation, right? So currently we're just a few weeks away from the elections, and it's just wild. It's just a wild situation in the U.S. And I don't know if that's something you want to talk about now, or if you'd rather still talk about the world situation. We could do that too. It's
well, let's bring it on in. Let's bring it on in. We have about go for another 15 minutes, and
okay.
let's talk about the U.S. situation here with the election. We have the sheep dipped. A lot of the people on the left are like, well, how did they're most Americans don't know how to. They don't know nothing about taxes, man. Most Americans have no freaking clue. So they're wondering how Donald Trump paid $758 in taxes. Well, if you understand tax, he paid a lot more than that. But nobody asked the question: how does an individual like Joe Biden become so lavishly wealthy? And he lives in such extravagant homes, and he has such nice cars in the tens of millions of dollars, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
How does he do that on a government salary? Nobody asked that question, Matt. And this sheep dip deep stater, who's been the point man in Ukraine, which we all know what that's all about. I'm gonna let you get into that.
Yeah.
What's at stake here in the U.S.? Go ahead, Matt. Break it down.
I mean, yeah, you're dealing with such a den of corrupt vipers. It's absurd, and it's coming out. I mean, I think that's just the beauty of what's happening right now. With not only this incredible situation of this laptop that I think everybody knows about at this point, that the New York Post covered. I read this article yesterday, and it's just wild. What Hunter Biden, this crackhead, former crackhead, perhaps, maybe I don't know if he still is. Probably.
I think he's been doing. Can you imagine the amount of crack he's been doing the last 48 hours?
Oh my god! Oh my god! Yeah, it's scary.
Can you imagine the bender he's on right now?
Oh, Jesus. Oh, it's bad. But it's great in another way, because it's just that this is happening the way it is. I mean, he just forgot that he had this computer that he asked to get repaired, and the hard drive backed up, and this thing made it into the hands of several people like Giuliani, that now all of a sudden became an expose, where on the hard drive it was discovered that not only do you have pictures of him doing crack and having sex with unnamed women, these aren't things I've seen, but have been described in detail. But more importantly, I think strategically, you have the correspondences between him and one of the representatives from Burisma's board of directors, talking and thanking him for arranging meetings with his father, Joe, who's completely denied this on camera without blinking an eye, that he's never discussed Burisma with his son ever. So not only was that a lie, but he actually had meetings with the guy who also asked Hunter on this hard drive, on this email exchange, if he could do something about the prosecutor general of Ukraine, who's giving them a hard time, which we now know from that 2018 CFR speech by Joe Biden, where he's bragging over having gone to Ukraine after he helped or coordinated with Victoria Nuland the overthrow of the pro-Russian government, and installed a puppet government under Poroshenko and Yatsenyuk. We have him bragging that he threatened to withhold $1 billion. Do you have that right there? Oh, that's him just lying outright about Hunter. Yeah, that's a worthwhile image. But yeah, we actually have him bragging that he was going to withhold $1 billion of aid from the U.S. to Ukraine unless the prosecutor general were fired, which is exactly what happened. And he brags what a great thing that is on camera, totally detached. And yeah, there you're looking right there at the screenshot of the actual emails themselves. So this guy, and the point's been made by so many people really nicely, that Hunter has, crackhead, kicked out of the military for being on drugs, no skills, complete incompetent fellow, couldn't even remember that he brought a highly sensitive array of information on a laptop to get repaired and then just forgot about it. Completely incompetent, and somehow gets a job earning $50,000 a year in the biggest corrupt energy firm in Ukraine. No, this is not something he's earned. And then on top of that, you have other intel that's come to the surface of his work with sex trafficking rings tied to the wife of the mayor of Moscow.
There was, Matt, real quick. There was one of the reporters for OAN, OAN News Network, Chanel Rion. She and a team were permitted to view the contents of the laptop. And what she reported back is there's a lot of illegal things. There was, I think, about 27,000 photos. 11,000 of those photos are linked to Ukraine. And within those photos, what she said is, quote, a lot of underage desires or underage, things that are in there that are underage, which kind of makes me think. And there's something that's been floating around in the intel world, and I'll kind of read off a quote that I got from one of my guys who's also a very brilliant mind, also connected to some intel guys as well. And I'll read it off. This is something that he texted to me last night, and this is what the whole entire thing really comes down to. Um, Here we go. He says, "There are two things, and they're connected. This is what they're terrified of. That's coming out the most. Now, we got Chanel Rian's post on Twitter about the underage obsession. That's what Chanel Rian said, the reporter. We know the laptop repair guy went to both the media and the FBI because of what he found on Hunter's laptop. So what they're postulating and what some really smart guys are putting together here, the pieces, the reaction that we've seen from social media. Because let's be honest here, Matt, we've never seen a reaction like this. Where this is not, hey, we're not going to let you tweet out JimmyJohnsConspiracyCorner.com. We're not going to let you tweet out that, the alien reptilians are coming down here and they're drinking your brain's plasma and devouring kidneys. We're not going to tweet that out. We're not going to let you do that. No, this is the New York Post, one of the oldest papers in the country, one of the most widely circulated papers in the country. The paper that was discovered by I think it was John Quincy Adams, right? I think it was John Quincy Adams who discovered the paper. They blocked that newspaper. Why? Why couldn't you not even share the link? Why could you not? Is this just because Hunter Biden on a bender in the Ukraine? Was it just the whole entire thing of, Hunter Biden, influence peddling? Is that it's about? Was that what was all about? Or is there something more nefarious at work, where there was indeed inappropriate images of young children, young girls that are under the age of 16, some as young as 11 and 12 years old? What some of these guys are saying is that Hunter, and quote unquote, and I'm quoting the text I got last night, quote, Hunter raped a kid, but no one is talking about or asking the question, where did this child come from?
Yeah. No, I think that, this is a reckoning that's a long time coming. And I mean, this is only one of many aspects of the increasing recognition that there is a purely evil culture at the top of this pyramid. And I'm not endorsing in any way the QAnon stuff, but the reality of pedophile rings at the upper echelons of power right now are very real. And the fact that they are there's light being forced upon them for the first time is creating a lot of cognitive dissonance that has to be dealt with very seriously by people in both the power structures and the masses alike. No, that's a serious deal. But I mean, more than that, I mean, all sorts of things that had been previously kept in the shadows are coming to light. The fact that you have the declassification as well of ever more of these classified reports that have been sat on by the FBI and the CIA pertaining to the entrapment operations against Flynn and the messages of Hillary Clinton, who directly had a meeting that Obama knew about, and that John Brennan scribbled his notes confirming that the Trump-Russia collusion should be cooked up as a way to deflect attention away from her DNC servers that had just recently been made available for the public on WikiLeaks due to an internal breach. I mean, this is a whole other thing. So this is now, these notes are now things people can read, and there's a lot more coming right in time. I mean, this has got to all be made available. And the fact that the U.S. intelligence agencies, as well as British intelligence, tied to the DNC, tied to MI6, people like Richard Dearlove, have been discovered to be at the heart of this. Recently, it was discovered as well that Strobe Talbot from Brookings Institute, he's a Rhodes Scholar who was the former president of Brookings, is tied to the Russiagate dodgy dossier that Christopher Steele used, and that one of the former employees at Brookings, Igor Danchikov, who's just this screw-up, kind of like a Hunter Biden character, who had no connections to Russia, actually was hired by Christopher Steele to get all of this gossip that was used for the P dossier. This is now come to light. So all of these shadow creatures are increasingly being forced into the public light. And I mean, the institutions of the intelligence agencies, which include the mainstream media and Twitter and Facebook, have been forced to really go to extremes to try to shut down or deflect people's attention from this reality. But it's tough, to avoid it. Even though when Twitter shuts down the accounts, like you said, of the New York Post itself, or Trump's the White House spokesperson, that captures attention. You get people who even don't like Trump to think twice about what exactly is being shut down here. And it doesn't matter if you like Trump or not. If you hear about pedophilia rings, no matter how much you like Biden, if that's actually brought into your worldview, that he's protecting pedophilia rings with his son, that's not going to sit well with you. You might not want to even vote. So increasingly, I think coming into the elections, there's a lot of variables. There is the collapse of the financial system, which is a spark plug, again, that we didn't talk about. Maybe in a future installment, we can go into more detail. This is something hanging over everyone's head like a sword of Damocles. You have the Great Reset issue from the World Economic Forum and a lot of these oligarchs who are trying to use COVID as a cover to reset the world system under their conditions of unipolarism, instead of allowing nation states to really take the reins and manage it themselves. The way things like this were done more sanely under the periods of Franklin Roosevelt and the days of 1944, when the Bretton Woods was originally being designed around a pro-nation state system. Today, they don't want that. They just want a Green New Deal, which is a perversion of anything Roosevelt had done in the 30s, which rather than causing the operating system to value productivity and infrastructure the way the original New Deal did, the Green New Deal just uses the name and puts value instead on contracting humanity's ability to sustain itself by investments into green energies and things that are of such a low grade quality that you will not be able to sustain your future productivity or even the population of the earth that currently exists. It's a depopulation scheme. So you have these different things that Trump is battling, and the population as a whole has to do a lot more to make sure that the next 3 weeks provide a landslide victory for Trump. And the fight is going to continue. It's only going to get started because the Democrats are going to contest. You already have institutions inside of the U.S. military around people like Colonel Wilkerson. There's many high-level military officials tied to the military-industrial complex and the former Obama-Clinton security apparatus who have openly stated that there should be some coordinated effort to counteract Trump should he refuse to leave the White House. If, let's say, for example, hypothetically, mail-in ballots come in over December.
You know what's funny about the mail-in ballots, Matt? I don't know if you got this, but this is hilarious. I think the mail-in ballots have exploded in the deep state's face. It's exploded in the Democrats' face. In a recent poll, 65% of Democrat-registered males stated that they are afraid to go out and vote, that they will be staying in. Then what's happening is tens of thousands of mail-in ballots have been received. Okay, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots have been received where disinfectant spray has been sprayed upon the ballots, making them unreadable. Local election officials are now telling their constituents, please stop sanitizing your ballots. It has utterly blown up in their faces.
Oh, that is very funny. That is really funny. I didn't know that. Yeah. No, the whole thing's such a shit show. I don't know if I could say that.
Yeah, you could. Feel free.
Okay, yeah, such a shit show. It's really, really out of control. I think that, again, the game could be kicked over. We've seen this happen in history, so we shouldn't get complacent. I think that the Democrats and the entire deep state establishment, including many Republicans who are part of this Never Trump crowd, are freaked out. They're kind of like flailing in the wind. But the danger here is, I think, that the game can be kicked over, and the natural flow of development could be derailed once more, as it was in the case of Lincoln's assassination, in the case of the assassination of McKinley. World War I's artificial creation or the Wall Street support and Bank of England support of fascism in the 30s, or JFK's assassination. There were a lot of points where human society was being organized to move in one very positive direction, but due to the complacency and perhaps naivete of certain better minded people, that flow was subverted. So I think we have to take our history very seriously as a way to both learn not only what not to do, but also learn what is the enemy really afraid of. What are the Achilles heel? What is the of this parasite which is sort of latched on to human civilization for many, many generations? What is its weaknesses? What is it afraid of? What is it gone? Why has it gone out of its way to crush or kill individuals like Martin Luther King Jr. and slander their names for decades? What are they afraid of that these individuals, like Paul Robeson, for example, the great civil rights singer, activist, Pan-African, anti-fascist Renaissance man, what was he doing that scares the hell out of this empire so badly that they had to run an MK Ultra on him and then slander his name to this very day? And I think that we can get a lot of empowerment by that. And we also start recognizing what is it that Putin and Xi Jinping are aware of about the weakness of the empire and what all Americans should be much more aware of and acting in accordance with today. So I would just leave it there. And I noticed that you put up my website a few times, but I think that, yeah, I encourage people to check out the CanadianPatriot.org. It's CanadianPatriot.org, and also my other site, RisingTideFoundation.net. As two useful sites, which has a lot of video content, a lot of writings, and get in touch with us as well for more information. There's also I know you also interview very frequently Harley Schlanger of the Schiller Institute. I think that for Americans, a very important thing that they should do right now is to get in touch with Harley and see what they can actually do, because there is a big fight inside of the United States that needs all Americans to take part in that.
Yep, absolutely. Very well said. There's more bombshells dropping as I'm talking to you with Hunter Biden, man. I think this new Biden email, I think it just happened right now it just happened like 15 minutes ago. I'm just scanning through right now. It's saying that here we go. Porozhansky, that's the Burisma CEO or the spokesperson or the guy who's the main contact there, was critiquing a consulting proposal from Blue Star Strategies, Democrat public relations firm that eventually worked with Burisma. Hunter Biden served on the board of directors of the Truman National Security Project with Blue Star Strategies co-owner Sally Painter. The documents are from Hunter Biden's computer. Wow. So he's sitting on multiple boards on this giant fleecing thing. I mean, you got to understand. I mean, Ukraine is a place where $120 billion just disappeared. It went to a black hole. Nobody has any idea where it went.
Mm-hmm. It's wild. It's just like you said. I'm sure his crack cocaine consumption is probably hitting record levels right now. That's just amazing that it just keeps flooding out. I didn't think there was room for any more skeletons in this closet.
Oh, there's a lot more.
Big closet.
Man.
Big closet.
Huge. It's not even a closet. It's a warehouse.
It's
a skeleton warehouse.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Just in time for Halloween.
Just in time for a Halloween. It's amazing. If a quarter of what Giuliani alleges is true, the evidence contained on the laptop is finally the true smoking gun. This is massive. And isn't it funny? We have Hunter Biden, Paul Pelosi, and Christopher Hines. All three kids connected to U.S. politicians involved in Ukraine.
Man.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Mathew Ehret, thank you so much for being on and sharing this information with us, man. And once again, plug your social media and how people can get a hold of you.
Like I said, the websites are CanadianPatriot.org and RisingTideFoundation.net. They could Google me on Facebook. I haven't gotten into Twitter yet. I'm a bit afraid of that world,
you're not
maybe eventually. Yeah, I'm not missing anything. Okay, good. So yeah, it's something I got to figure out how to get onto social media.
Don't you have like a Discord group or something that?
No, I got it. Well, on Zoom, yeah, they can. Yes. People can get in touch with us if they want to be on our weekly classes every Sunday, and sometimes during the weekday we do classes
last week was on Paul Robeson and his life as an anti-fascist that, we could learn a lot from, being it that the Cold War is back in full force. So next week, this Sunday, we're going to do something on China, Confucianism, the I Ching, and statecraft. So we're going to have a whole series ongoing, and people can reach out on my email at matt.ehret@tutamail.com. They can also contact me on the websites as well.
Very well said. And with that being said, folks, we're at the end of the show. Make sure you subscribe, like, comment, and share. Spread the word. Rogue News, the last man standing for God knows how long. But I think we'll be fine. I think we'll be fine. I got some key Googlers nuts in a vice. So we'll see what happens. With that being said, CJ, take it away. Folks, enjoy your weekends.